Good
Hey,
morning, everybody.
Morning.
Morning.
How's everybody doing this morning?
Pretty
Great.
good. I
Hopefully.
feel like I need to get my microphone out, Scott. It's sort of official,
very
isn't it?
official, isn't he?
I'm gonna go get mine too.
I decided I had to level up my game.
We
So
need some screenshots of us pretending like we're.
Put
No.
your head, put your head.
I need my big headphones.
right. I'm a professional podcaster.
Where are we
My
going?
side.
You almost
It's
Where
got
you
yeah. It's my official side gig now.
I like it. I support it.
Does anybody have any active fires at the moment, or are we all still, hopefully, knock on wood, yeah, in the clear?
I believe Flagstaff's in the clear. There was something, but it wasn't encroaching on Flagstaff. I think it was small, but we don't have anything imminent, anything happening at the moment, thank goodness.
That's good. That's good. We've had a couple small starts nearby, but nothing that's grown or gotten out of control yet. Knock on wood. So, Sarah, how are things in Laramie?
Just windy. Did you
You
see the
know,
video of the hail in Denver yesterday? Anybody?
no.
Oh, it was crazy. It was like a blanket of hail.
I saw it on the news last night. It looked bonkers.
They were like
Why
shoveling it and like, yeah.
They had
Wyoming
that big
decided to make a
outdoor
guest
event that
appearance.
outside had their big music festival. No, that was ended on Sunday night yesterday, so I think that got cleared by then.
Wow. I did see that you guys got a bunch of snow though, like a week or two ago, which is probably good news for fire season.
That's normal. Graduation weekend, you got to have a blizzard.
It's fair. I think my favorite quote that I saw recently was that in certain parts of the country, you don't put away your winter clothes until May 45th, um, which is a wonderful way of implying that winter just sort of sticks around, um, depending on where you're at. So, do we have anybody else in the waiting room, Melissa, or should we
Well,
go ahead and
I've let everybody in. As people trickle in, I'll be happy to admit them. So if you want to get started, go right ahead.
awesome? And really quick, do I have the ability to share my screen, or does Stu, Andy, do you guys have sharing permissions? If not, I've got it pulled up just in
I
case.
think everybody should be able to share.
Looks good on
Okay.
my end. Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. Cool. Well, I appreciate all of you guys joining this morning. I know in many of our parts of the country, we're headed into peak summer tourism season, so I know everybody's Andy both with us this morning to speak to sort of what they learned from their experiences in the Calder Fire. They've both got very different perspectives, being on different sides of Lake Tahoe, and I'm really eager to just sort of take a back seat and learn from both of them, and then obviously have them share their presentation with us as well. So, Stu, if you want to kick us off, and then we'll transition, and I've got a couple questions for us at the end as well.
Perfect. Will do. Thanks, Scott. Let me bring up the deck here. Whoop, not that one. Hold on. Whoops, I apologize. I don't know why I'm getting the wrong one here. Maybe I might get you to share here, Scott. For some reason, I'm having technical issues.
Yeah, let me see.
Or actually, let me try something else real quick. Do apologize. Okay, I think I've got it up here.
All good.
Okay, is everyone seeing that?
Yep.
Perfect. Okay, so my name's Stuart Mass. I'm the Senior Director of Marketing Business Development in Visit Lake Tahoe. We're the South Shore DMO slash kind of CVB, both California and Nevada. And joining me as well is going to be Andy Chapman, who is the CEO of Lake Tahoe Travel. So we're going to give you a kind of South Lake and North Lake Tahoe perspective. I'm going to kind of focus on the Caldor fire, and Andy's going to jump more into kind of smoke effects, neighboring DMOs, and how those affected during the Caldor fire. So, quick session overview here. We're just going to go over some of the preparation, how we set up for this, how that landed into the crisis communication and response, some of the economic and operational impacts that were affected both in South Lake Tahoe and also in the region in general. How we communicated, I'll show you the map of Lake Tahoe. It's quite a complex destination, 5 counties, 2 states, a lot of different land managers, and then also just some of the recovery and rebuilding of trust. And then we'll open up for any questions or comments that kind of come after here. So just kind of setting the stage here for what happened and how we got set up here. Tahoe has been on the kind of peak of kind of economic or environmental restoration. We have been doing a lot of forest management and mitigation over the years, again, with all the different land management agencies. We have the BLM, California State Parks, Forest Service. Each does their own piece to try and mitigate fires. And post Calder fire, certainly that did get ramped up, but we were in a fairly good place prior to that. One of the kind of few good things that came out of the pandemic is we actually set up a destination stewardship council. So that was our regional stewardship planning. There is not only a core group, but there's also some subcommittees that work under that. So we did have a good communication framework set up going into this so we could easily communicate anything. It wasn't initially set up, obviously, for fire. It was set up for kind of pandemic communication, but as it merged into certain different layers, it set us up well for the Caldor fire and how we could talk about that. And really going into this next one here. So as far as kind of the messaging, and I think this is really a key point, we relied really on the CAL FIRE, some of the other agencies that were involved. The DMO for fire really doesn't need to kind of be the voice necessarily of what exactly is going on. We just amplify that message. So what was kind of interesting with this is just the different sources of information. I'll probably come back to this a little bit later on, but we made sure that our agencies were aware that we really need a kind of bold know before you go or destination update. I think we actually had it as a mandatory pop-up when you went on to visitlaketahoe.com. That was really key. At this point, it's not really our job to promote destination travel. It's more just to kind of amplify the kind of updates that are happening so people can really understand for themselves, is it a time to go or not? And we were really focused on supporting and again, not replacing any communication information from say the fire service or our roads or our city or anything. But what it did allow us, once we had that communication network set up in place, is it allowed us to really daily get information. We time-stamped everything so everyone could understand exactly how new the information was. And we just had that one point of information, which was the kind of know before you go, or I think at the time we had a destination update there. So talking about Lake Tahoe geography and the regional complexity, for those that are not familiar with the Lake Tahoe area, I've just kind of shown a little map here of kind of our situation. So I'm in the south shore of Lake Tahoe, both on the California and the Nevada side here. Andy and his DMO, Lake Tahoe Travel, are up on the north shore, again, California, and also Incline Village. And there was a lot of different impacts when we had the fire come through, because it was coming from the southwest down here in the South Shore of California. And then it was kind of leading up with the smoke going up towards the southwest. That's generally our prevailing wind. Tahoe, especially in August, is really tied into outdoor recreation. So not only does the wildfire and access and those things affect us, but smoke also is a huge impactor. And Andy's going to jump into that in a little bit more detail about some of the events and other kind of challenges he had during that visit time in Lake Tahoe. We have outdoor summer concerts. There's, extreme kind of athlete events, lots of different things that the AQI certainly affects what's going on there. And so the Caldor Fire, if those who are unfamiliar with it, the Caldor Fire was a very large wildfire. It burned 221,000 acres in the El Dorado National Forest and Amador Alpine counties. It was first reported on August 14th of 21 and was finally contained all the way through October 21st of 21. And we did have an evacuation order, and I'll talk about that a little bit when that happened. So it destroyed over 1,000 structures, damaged 81 more, predominantly kind of along the Highway 50 corridor. That's our southern main south of Highway 80 that runs up into the north. But Highway 50 was the one that was predominantly affected, which is our main artery for the San Francisco Bay Area. One of the key takeaways from this is just kind of how the organization works when something like this, a big fire affects us. We had really different, I call it a tale of two worlds with staff and how they were able to react to this and their situation. If you were in South Lake Tahoe, kind of more on the western side, you were probably greatly affected by the fire, especially with the smoke and, the fire kind of creeping up there. If you were staff in our office that lives on the Nevada side, it was almost business as usual. You definitely have smoke impacts, but you could still come to the office. You weren't under any evacuation order. And it was a very challenging time to understand because we kind of couldn't all come to the office, where people were, what their situation was like. Were they in a hotel? Were they with family? What was their access to internet? It was greatly kind of impacted how we could do operations. And I think it's really important to kind of clearly understand each staff member's role when you go into something like this, into an emergency. We also had a lot of pressure from all of our stakeholders. So again, Visit Lake Tahoe is kind of comprised of a Nevada Board of Directors and Funding Source, a California Board of Directors and Funding Source that kind of merge into our Lake Tahoe Visitors Authority Board. Now, on the California side, there's a lot more impacts. People couldn't get access up to the lake. We're in peak August summer travel. There was a lot of cancellations going on. There was a lot of pressure from us, from residents or just locals, to say people don't come here. But again, if you're a Nevada casino and you have air quality services within and someone's going to gamble, you're probably not going to be affected by the wildfire smoke. So it was quite challenging for us. We went through this with the pandemic as well, being bi-state in multiple counties, that certain parts of our stakeholders are saying, don't tell people not to come, but then others are saying very much, this is not the time that we should be having visitors. So it was quite hard for us to get that messaging out and truly be aligned without kind of, annoying some of our leadership. A VP for one of our casino properties in Las Vegas is probably looking at this in a very different lens than one of our small motel owners on the California side that just can't have staff coming. They're getting a lot of cancellations. It's really affected them. So it was really interesting to see how that went out. Our evacuation order, I believe, started on, I think it was about the August the 25th. That was when it was, you have to leave Tahoe. And I've just shown a photo here of kind of what that looked like. The media, by all means, out of any kind of, tragedy, do like to really kind of amplify the bad messaging. This wasn't too bad. There's a lot of naysayers, and I think Andy's going to touch on this about, how we can do evacuations within Tahoe. But when we got the order, I think the maximum time it took people to get out was about 3 or 4 hours. Those that were being affected by the smoke or were a little bit more concerned about evacuation did pre-evacuate. Myself and my wife and my dog actually did that a week before we went down to Reno Airport. It was a dog-friendly hotel. We were going camping for the Labor Day weekend down in Mammoth anyway, so we were kind of set up to be roaming and free anyway. And I had a conference in Tampa that I actually flew out to right when this evacuation order had started. I flew straight back in. As far as communications, again, we were quite well set up from the pandemic with all of our land managers, all of our main stakeholders, whether that be the ski resorts, our board of directors, our lodging association, restaurant association, chamber of commerce, really making sure everyone's kind of tied in and singing the same message, which is either do not come or here is the information. I was able to find one of our press releases, I think finally on August 26th. So that's going to be, 12 days after the fire started. We actually were approved to put out messaging through our PR agency that said we encourage guests to postpone visits until further notice. Again, some business owners aren't going to really like that, but I think finally at that point it was getting to that kind of real crisis that we said, listen, just postpone. You're not going to have a good time. Nothing's really open. It's not the experience that you'd want in Lake Tahoe. One other thing I think is key when you're working with media, we had to make sure that we had media requests set up. I think that was key. We couldn't take all of the media requests, but when you start becoming kind of headline news on the BBC or Washington Post, and the world is seeing it under those eyes, it is kind of important that we do have unified messaging out there. And I think another key component is to ensure you have trust within the media. I was speaking with my CEO, Carol, about this a little bit yesterday, and she mentioned that it was hard for her when she was getting these interviews to not come out with that soundbite to say, we are closed or do not come, because she hadn't kind of got the full approval, buy-in of all of our stakeholders, both California and Nevada. And as you all know, being in kind of leadership, you can get in a little bit of trouble if you're not providing that correct message. So she actually found that she had lost trust within the media because, they were asking her, hey, so the roads are closed. The AQI is like 300 or 400. It's terrible. There's no staff. You've got nearly 5,000 firefighters in the basin, but you're saying people are still coming. And I think that kind of, we look back at that and I think we've got a better crisis communication plan coming forward, knowing that that was perhaps not the correct means to go about that. And again, just try not to avoid duplication. There's going to be certain entities. Ours was the Cal Fire, and they had daily updates that we would kind of post a link to their website whenever we had that, or maybe it would be the roads that were closed or any other entities. Just put that information up and just make it a quick link to your know before you go. You don't need to overdo it on social media and those things. Just plain and simple within there. So as far as kind of the operational and economic impacts, once you're on the world media news, it's going to be hard to recover. We definitely had a lot of regional disruptions. There was, businesses were pretty much closed. Some restaurants stayed open. We had 5,000 firefighters actually in town. So some of our hotels were actually sold out. A lot of the casinos had offered up, free rooms for the firefighters if they weren't in their fire camps or incident command centers. And then also these brave men and women needed fed as well. So some of our restaurants stayed open, provided meals to them. There was a really kind of good feel good that came out from that. Recreation, Forest Service lands were definitely closed, especially for access, for safety measures, not only on our kind of southwest quadrant, but also even on our west, east, and kind of the whole Tahoe Basin. Just on the right there is a horrible image from Sierra Tahoe. Sierra Tahoe probably was our biggest entity that did get affected. They did unfortunately lose not their main kind of base area, but their maintenance shed, some of their lifts, shacks, and we thought actually that that ski resort was gone, but they came above from the ashes and are open now, and still some great skiing. So I'm going to hand it over to Andy now to kind of talk about our North Lake Tahoe perspective and maybe take us through some more of the next slides, and then we can jump back.
Great. Thanks, Stuart and Scott. And I want to thank Stuart for putting this deck together, because it's a great deck, and it really kind of the imagery behind some of these the messages. This is really what was being dealt with. And just a quick couple points that you mentioned, Sierra Tahoe, Stuart, which was one of our hometown ski resorts. The maintenance shack actually blew up, because that's where they had all the gas stored. That's where they had all the munitions stored, for those that know how you have to manage snow and avalanche and things like that. So the actual maintenance shack blew up, and they didn't think that would have happened because it was a cement building. So so this fire was really critical. So yeah, the kind of the tale of the two worlds, a little different between North and South, but it's interesting because at this time I was actually living in South Shore. I have since moved up to the North Shore area, but was also evacuated for about 2.5 weeks. And kind of a side story, Tahoe has a series, as the West does, of fire cameras, which I know you all may be familiar with. You can go on that Alert Tahoe or Alert Fire. I think ours is Alert Tahoe. And you can look at the fire cameras. And they had put and installed a temporary fire camera, because I was looking around the map. It's like, hey, that's kind of a new fire camera. Let me look at that. It was right above my house, which was both comforting and a little bit alarming, because at certain times during the night you could look in and just see the shrapnel of fire coming across the camera. So, but luckily, as Stuart said, no homes burned in the Tahoe Basin. Some out buildings, I think, did. The fire actually jumped over Highway 89 as it came up the Echo Summit area, for those familiar with the region. So that was really critical, and kudos to everybody that worked on this fire, because it was pretty impressive. So yeah, from North Shore's perspective, we were dealing a lot of the same kind of conundrums that Stuart was talking about on the Nevada side, because it, to some extent, it was just a bad smoke summer like we've seen in the past, but you still kind of carry on. And some of our businesses were trying to figure out exactly how to do that. I'm going to talk a little bit about smoke impact on large events here in a second, but at the end of the day, as Stuart said, the DMOs, we follow the PIOs and the PIO stance, whether that's the official jurisdictional organization, sheriffs, in our case, or Cal Fire or others. But also, once we saw what our partners were dealing with on the South Shore, we needed to be supportive of that, because we also didn't know what kind of impacts, if it did go, worse, how much, we needed those roads open for fire protection and things like that. So we also went out with, please don't come. And it wasn't a good experience regardless. That's an actual picture of it. You can see down there from the North Shore. And, it just, you don't want to come to Tahoe and have this type of an experience. So again, there was operational uncertainty, who was open, who was closed. We remained open. Our restaurants and hotel properties remained open. We were not under evacuation. But understanding what the regional issues were. And again, just the coordination is critical in these cases, because it isn't a single jurisdictional effort. As we know, 2 states, 5 counties, multiple jurisdictions. So that's critical. Go to the next slide there, Stuart. So, business support, obviously, and Stuart's probably going to jump back to this as well, as we kind of, how did we get back up and running? One thing that we have the benefit of, we have 2 states here and 2 state tourism offices, both Travel Nevada and Visit California. Particularly Visit California is very well positioned at, disaster mitigation, so to speak, because there, from a California perspective, there's just so much of that. So as an entity, Visit California was at the table, really understanding what those needs are, how to help communicate that on a much broader basis, letting people know when businesses were back up and running and when it was safe to do so. So that really helped. And getting the coordinated messages out once we kind of got to that later September, even though the fire didn't really officially go out until October sometime, when the first snow hit is when that just extinguished the fire. But things were starting to come back. The skies were clearing, depending on which way the winds were blowing and stuff. So we were participating in that. Really, know before you go, being prepared when you came up here to make sure you understood what was actually what you could do or couldn't do when you came up here. So those issues, again, we leaned on our Destination Stewardship Council communications team that had been kind of set up during the pandemic, which really did help us. And think about this was only a year after that first pandemic summer that things were quite crazy. As we all know, in the mountain destinations, we were all inundated with folks after the pandemic, and this summer was no different. So there was pretty huge impacts in that. Going to the next slide, I just wanted to kind of talk just a little bit about some of the other issues that we see here. So we had a number of events that have had issues related to weather, and so it is becoming somewhat of an issue, although the last couple of years not as bad, where our late summer, early fall business impacts have been impacted because of clients and wedding planners and corporate group events hesitant to book a big meeting in Tahoe or really kind of anywhere in the destination mountain resort industry because of smoke and because of fire. Fires could be miles and miles and miles away, but that smoke, depending on how that comes in, gets into the basin. So there's not a lot of indoor options to move big events if they happen, and certainly these types of events. But back in 2013, which is the upper left corner there, we hosted the Ironman race. It started with snow that night and 38-degree temperatures. So there was a point where they were going to call that race off after really 2 years of planning. But they did go with that race and were able to successfully finish it. And it was actually made quite an allure of Ironman. It's like it was a tough Ironman to race. The following year, the picture below that's the King Fire. That was in 2014. The Ironman was actually canceled at race time due to that. Now that picture was taken at the start line, which was in Kings Beach. The finish line, which is in the middle top there, that's at Olympic Valley Palisades, where the AQI was over 900 at the finish line. So that had to be obviously canceled, which was pretty detrimental. Obviously, we had one more race with the Ironman contract, and then that organization determined, putting on events in Tahoe maybe wasn't quite right for them, so they moved on. And then the last one there, the bottom, middle, and then the right, this was an effort we did with the LTVA back in 2011. We had the starting stages of the Amgen Tour of California, and it snowed over 13 inches in May, the day of the race. And that's a shot up around Emerald Bay that I took in the morning as I went in to hopefully see the race start. But obviously you can't do a bike race around a lake with that type of effort. So, really we all kind of deal with, this is a little off the subject of the Caldor fire, but we all, I know from destinations, deal with different types of event issues in Mother Nature's, but they have, serious impacts on years of work that then kind of can crumble in an instant. The saying in Tahoe is, if you wanted to snow, just throw an outdoor event and you're guaranteed to get it. So with that, I think I'm going to turn it back to Stuart for a little bit of recovery and rebuilding.
Yeah, thanks, Andy. So I think the main entity, along with our public lands, our trail networks was Sierra at Tahoe and kind of understanding when and how they could come back. They weren't able to open that first winter that they got going. There was a lot of rebuilding. They had to restring their chairlifts, rebuild some of their infrastructure, replan. A lot of safety mitigation went on as far as stabilizing the area. There was a lot of burnt trees down and kind of clearing those out, but they were able to get back up. As Andy mentioned, kudos to Visit California, and also Travel Nevada, but really Visit California. They really did help us with some of the recovery efforts and getting that message out, especially to our international markets, because I know a lot of the media was saying, Tahoe's closed, Tahoe's burnt. It was not. What I got my team to do is go out and take photos. We went out on a boat to the middle of the lake and took a 360 panorama and said, "Do you see any burnt areas there?" It was a tragedy what happened kind of coming up on the west slope up to Lake Tahoe. That damage was very evident, still is when you go up there. They've done a lot of great work to both replan and also kind of rebuild that area, but you can still see a fire rip through there. In the Tahoe Basin, though, we were blessed. The fire did jump over 89. It affected some of Heavenly Ski Resort, but not kind of the main area. And again, when you're seeing kind of Tahoe's closed and, all these San Francisco Chronicle and SF Gate articles, that wasn't really true. So we made sure we really ramped up our PR efforts, again, utilizing our communication team with the Destination Stewardship Plan, our PR agency, and saying we are open. But what I will say, if this does happen to you, give your residents and staff and everything a little bit of time to recover. Just because evacuations orders are off and you're back in your home, there's a lot of work to do to restock your restaurants. A lot of your staff might have gone down to the coast. They're going to take a couple of days to get back on their foot, get things normalized. So I think we kind of really started getting the message out about a week or two after Labor Day to say we are open, things are good now. Ensure, when you are coming up here, that probably that trail or hike that you had planned is probably not going to be an option. And so we then start to work with, we have a Tahoe Area Mountain Bike Association, we have the Tahoe Rim Association, start to work with them and understand what is open, what isn't open, what is planned to be open, just to give our visitors, the expectation of what their visit will look like. Obviously, our downtown, our gaming product, some of the other kind of recreation is going to be open. But as far as that great outdoors and some of those things, that's probably going to look a little bit different, especially for that first year while the Forest Service and the fire crews get in and make sure everything's safe to do that. Again, with the national media, Visit California certainly helped bolster that message to get out there. We had quite a strong narrative to say that we are open for business and please come and visit us. We need your support. And we actually found that there was, some of our visitors, especially, the Sacramento and the Bay Area crowd, they really did want to support local businesses and make sure people didn't close. This was a tough time. It was the middle of summer. It's our kind of last big economic impact kind of point for August before we roll into our shoulder season and into the winter. So that was key, that we didn't lose, almost a month's worth of business. And there was some really interesting fundraising campaigns that went on, especially for Sierra at Tahoe and, anyone else that was really in need, how we can kind of get back and really get them back up on their feet again. As far as the reopening, the recreation, as I mentioned, this took quite a lot of time. With the fire officially being out with the first snow in mid-October, we went into the winter season and, a lot of that ground's kind of covered. We knew that the fires were out, but it's, when people are hiking a trail, you need to make sure that there's not a kind of half dead, burnt tree that's going to fall on them or anything. So there's a lot of mitigation for that trail network. And there was also a lot of replanting efforts. I work in the meetings and sports kind of aspect as well. And recently we have been diverting a lot of our kind of CSR or community give back programs to our sugar pine planting. So not only community and residents were able to get part of that, but there was a really kind of good feel good that when any of our associations or corporations or anything came in, not only did they want to kind of maybe help clean the beaches and stuff, but there was another opportunity for them to help rebuild our forests and replant those forests. And that's kind of something that we've been trying to focus on. How do we do something, say, with the Sugar Pine Foundation? That's kind of one of our original natural tree species, how we can replant those areas and get that back. We've definitely been since the pandemic on a lot of ups and downs. I think we've got a playbook for just about every situation now, at least in Lake Tahoe. So this was just one. We had Snowmageddon follow. We love to have big critical issues each season. So luckily, we have this framework in place. I think is one of the key takeaways. If you don't already, I would highly recommend, whether it's from the origins of a destination stewardship plan or it's just having a good comms perspective with your land managers, your key stakeholders, the states, everyone. That's really going to aid in these efforts. So you're not scrambling to find out who's the best person, who should I be contacting, and whatnot. Luckily now, all of our lands are fully open. They look a little bit different, especially on the west shore, but certainly on the east, north, and most of the south, you wouldn't even know really that a fire had gone through. Andy, I'll just pass it over to you just for some of these kind of lessons learned, and maybe I'll chime in at the end if there's anything else here.
Thank you. Yeah, so some of the long-term recovery, we seem to be in recovery all the time right now, going back to pandemic, to this fire, to the Snowmageddon, as Stu mentioned. So it's really, having those connections and those relationships within the community and people who might not normally be at our DMO tables. So it's who are we dealing with in the fireside? Who are we dealing with in county evacuation or county emergency management? Creating those relationships or trying to have influence or input into those relationships in the middle of a disaster is not the time to be setting those up. So a lesson that I've taken to heart is to really understand what that looks like and making sure that we have those established relationships during the calm, so that everyone has that opportunity. Resident sentiment is interesting in Tahoe, and I know it's probably in your communities as well. One of the things that we found, so the evacuation, it was like 50,000 people got evacuated, very orderly with no issues. We have some in our community. I endearly call them the cave people, citizens against virtually everything. Doesn't matter what it is, but it's just they're against that. But they've really globbed onto this fire evacuation, at least in Tahoe, and they're using it in a way to try to dissuade jurisdictions from approving projects. It might be expanding projects, even though those projects might be water quality issues and things like that. And we have one where you can create a lot with AI now. So we have this one group that went out there and created an evacuation plan for Lake Tahoe using AI, and it basically is at completely contradicting what the authorities say an evacuation will look like in Tahoe. So, but they're using these things and they're using these levers to try to push their agendas. But we just recently did a resident sentiment survey up here in Incline, and it was a bit of a brutal read from a standpoint of a tourism perspective, because sometimes they may not be hearing some of the things that we're doing to actually mitigate some of this tourism impact, which is really where we sit now under a destination management organization and not just marketing. Although we are a tourism economy, we're always going to be a tourism economy. So that's critical. So we're really kind of keeping an eye on that sentiment piece as well. Community first leadership, I think, is critical as well. As how are we being seen in the community? Again, not during times of just issues, but during good times as well, how we're supporting organizations so that we do have those contacts and that ability to lean in. And then the trust and preparedness is critical. I mean, as simple as a crisis communication plan, that's why we started post pandemic, and now that is, you know, a much different look. But being able to have these tools to pull off and tools to provide our stakeholders, because they don't have the ability to put these things together necessarily. And so how can we help support that during these times as well? And I think that I had some notes over here, but I believe that's what I had.
Yeah, just
Back to you,
couple
Steve.
couple final points. Just kind of three takeaways I would say is one is really that clear communication. I think we've talked about that, and just making sure that you have it streamlined. Everyone is singing the same tune, and making sure you're utilizing your POIs and those entities that are kind of on the day to day, making sure that's very easy and right in front of your visitors. It's also a great resource for your residents and anyone else, media and whatnot. So that's probably key, in making sure that someone is able to update that. So a lot of us got some quick lessons in WordPress, I think, because our webmaster was also under a big evacuation and, you know, maybe is traveling that time or other things going on. So making sure someone can always kind of keep those updates going. Transparency is key as well. You know, a fire is going to affect what the destination looks like. You know, we have our web cameras. That was a really good thing for people asking, hey, what's the smoke like? Well, here's the AQI and here's what it looks like out there. We're not saying each person's different with how, you know, smoke and air quality will affect them. We just put out the information, and it's really up to that visitor. It's kind of like what we have to do with snow and road conditions as well. And the final point is just kind of empathy. So I think we kind of get numb these days to watching the news. Oh, there's a big fire, evacuations, and until it really happens to you, it's you know, a kind of life changer for me. You know, Scott and Andy and I kind of powwowed a week or two ago about this, and certainly what I packed for my evacuation would look a lot different from at that time what I thought was important to really, when you are, you know, miles away from your house, maybe can't return, and what are key kind of possessions for you. And then also think from the staff aspect, from a leadership point of view. We had some of our admin and visitor center staff, and you know, maybe they hadn't budgeted for $150 a night for a hotel for 2 weeks. They might be single mothers. They might have, you know, animals they're taking care of. They might not have that network of family and friends that they can easily go down and life at normal. It can be a big uptake for them. So just kind of, you know, bear with staff. They're not going to be able to maybe function as normal, at least till they get settled. So those are kind of my three takeaways. So I think that's kind of what we've got. I'll stop the share now, and I think we'd be happy to open up to any questions that we have.
I don't necessarily have questions, but I just want to thank you guys. What a great presentation. Thorough and interesting, and it's very reaffirming in a lot of ways, you know, and then it just little notes that you take of, oh yeah, remember this, remember that. So thank you very much.
Thanks.
I was curious when you started the fire cameras, and was that prior to this? Are those done by the emergency management?
So that was a project through the Tahoe Prosperity Center, which is our kind of regional economic development nonprofit organization, you know, because again, the 2 states, 5 counties, there's not one Lake Tahoe economic development group. So that's what the Tahoe Prosperity is. So they got some grants. So it was predated this fire. And I don't know, I think there's probably like 12 cameras, maybe even more than that right now. So it was a fundraising campaign. I think the Tahoe Fund, which is a big fundraising organization of the region, you know, had donors that would want to participate in that. The Tahoe Community Foundation also. So, you know, it was definitely a big fundraising campaign to get those, and then, you know, how to get them installed and working through all those efforts. You know, kind of using cell phone towers and, you know, trying to make arrangements and agreements with the cell phone tower operators and things like that. But If you haven't gone to Alert Tahoe, go take a look because it's pretty impressive. And it's, basically the cameras are trained to look for it's lightning strikes primarily, as we all know, but it's a pretty impressive network.
Hey, this is Lori from Discover Flagstaff. Stuart and Andy, thank you so much. As Trace had mentioned, really, really an informative webinar. Thank you very, very much. A couple of questions here. Um, Stuart, I don't know if it was you or Andy had mentioned don't overdo social media. Can you just give me a elevator perspective on that?
Yeah, I think that was me, Laurie. So again, because with the pandemic and those things, we kind of had a playbook as to how we handle social media. And what we wanted to do there is really just keep pointing people to our Know Before You Go destination update, whatever that looks like, without kind of leading too much information or anecdotal kind of, traits into that. We still had people that were adamant on coming up here. They would not going to change their plans. They were the hardcore. We come up every year and everything. And again, because we were in that conundrum of we weren't quite ready to say, do not come. What we were doing is really just pointing visitors to the Know Before You Go pages. So if you haven't got those set up as a template in the back end of your website, I highly recommend you have that ready, have a nice template system that, anyone and have multiple staff people that can update those. What we were doing is really just using our webcams. And every day, what we would do is we use Luna and Prism webcams. I just installed a new one just up at the top of our casino here looking down. But we had multiple perspectives of the destination. And what we would do on that Know Before You Go is we take a screenshot every day of that webcam that would show smoke on the lake, and it was time stamped at 7:32 a.m. And that would be what you would anticipate your visit to Tahoe to look like. So we weren't really engaging in that kind of social chatter. Any response would be check out this Know Before You Go. This is the information we have. We're not going to relay too much extra into there. And again, just from a staff perspective as well, there wasn't much for us to do, visitor inspiration, even though, we'd normally kind of say, get ready for ski season or here's the rest of our entertainment for the rest of the summer. That's not our role at this point. We, our public entities, because we have the biggest voice out there, need us to relay that information to the world. So nice and simple, strategic plan, make sure someone's always going to cover that. And I think we were just posting every 2 or 3 days, keeping it nice and simple, not too much kind of emotion into it, just plain and simple facts.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that. I think, and Stuart mentioned this, not duplicating the efforts of the official authorities, but pointing to them. Don't try to keep up your website to say, here's actually what's going on. It's just here's the link. Here's the link to Cal Fire. Here's the link to Washoe County. Here's the link to El Dorado County. And let the user find that path themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect. Super helpful, super just relatable and doable. Thank you. The next and final question is, you mentioned assistance from the state's tourism office. What were three best practices or three takeaways that you got the most, that the organization, that the city got the most lift from?
Do you want to start, Andy, or?
Sure. Yeah, I'll start. So we had obviously Travel Nevada and Visit California, both very great state offices. Visit California, obviously has a lot of resources. They're quite a large organization, and they've dealt with these things across the state. It's obviously a huge state. So they actually have this matrix that they put together, a crisis matrix that kind of determines what the issue is and then what level of engagement or interaction that they get into, or eventually when you get far enough down the line, when do they really get to the point where like don't come? And I'll use the Paradise Fire in LA as an example and things like that. So they had this matrix already in place, which really helped us kind of look at that to understand, okay, where would they be at this point in time, so that we kind of understood that. And then just the personal relationships, knowing the people in the offices, whether that's in the public relations side, public affairs side, or even the CEO of the organization, who obviously, Tahoe is a gem of both of these states, so it's a highly sought after destination. So it's critical in their complex as well. So I think that matrix that they put together was key. And then again, having those contacts within those offices that we knew how to contact and where to contact. And then making sure they were getting our information, so that they were on those distribution lists, so that they were seeing what we were putting out as well. I don't know if you want to add to that.
Yeah. So Andy, did the state office communicate, say, on the international side of visitation? Were they communicating? I'm assuming that you guys had the don't come. Were they communicating to the international traveler, or is that something that you guys did locally?
So, that's a tricky one, right? Because international visitation, you don't want to cut off somebody's interest who might be coming 3, 6, 9 months down the road, but then all of a sudden they see this thing's going on. So obviously it was more of the immediate issue. So yeah, they would let their offices know, obviously. So they have, I don't know, at that point they probably had 12 or 15 offices internationally, and probably still do, if not more. So they would let each of those office key folks within those international office understand what was going on, and they're probably getting daily updates anyway on a variety of things. So this would have been one of those. So we had, and Stewart as well, have international offices that we have rep situations in as well, and obviously those are our key international markets for us. It's kind of Australia, Canada, Mexico, UK. There could be others. So they were understanding directly from what was going on, and could tell their travel partners to at least notify folks who were already on their way to Tahoe. But it was a balance, right? Because you needed to deal with the immediate issue, but not cut off any kind of that future opportunity.
It makes perfect sense. Perfect sense. Thanks for the detail there.
Yeah. And real quick, sorry about that, Stuart. I interrupted you.
No.
But I was just going to say, the international traveler is rarely, they have focal points, but they're on an itinerary. They're not a destination necessarily specific. So, they just need to know where to pivot most of the time, not to not come at all in a situation like this. Just my opinion.
Yeah. I think also kind of looking at more on the group side, meetings, convents, conferences, we had to cancel quite a lot. There was then a lot of uncertainty in the market. Like Andy mentioned, weddings, people, want to do weddings in spring now when there's, still snow on the ground, and not that aspect of them getting, their beautiful photos affected by anything. But also from the meeting conference side, it took me a couple of years to kind of rebuild confidence that August and September and October are still good months for coming to Tahoe. We do have big indoor facilities now. This is just a kind of one-off. So that took a little bit longer than I think from the leisure traveler side. And then one of the other key takeaways, especially for the media, state offices and everything, is make sure that you're keeping a kind of bank or database of some of the kind of feel-good stories that come out of this. There is a lot of good community kind of give back from these. A couple that I remember is the Lake Tahoe Wildlife Care. We have a rehab center here, and they were bringing in a lot of the animals that had, either been displaced or, had injuries to them. And there was a huge fundraiser. People do want to give back to the communities and destinations that they travel to. And that was a really nice story. Again, how can people help Tamba or our, Tahoe Trail Network rebuild, whether it's, financial or actually hands on the ground to rebuild some of those trails. And then even some of the hotels that had staff working 12-hour shifts to care for the emergency responders, the other staff that were really kind of helping us navigate this. So making sure you have those stories, because they can be very impactful, and media do like those for recovery messages. So I'd say those would be my takeaways.
Great. Thank you. That's it for me.
All right, I know we're almost out of time. Does anybody have any last minute questions before we wrap up? Stu and Andy, thank you both so much. I want to echo everybody else in that. And I think, Stu, your word of empathy really resonates with me just from the standpoint of you guys have both gone through this in ways that most of us can't even wrap our heads around. And kudos to you for your leadership in this space. And thank you both for joining us this morning, too. Couple of quick housekeeping notes before we wrap up. Next meeting is early August. I believe the date is August 4th. We'll keep this conversation going. Also, shameless plug, One West CEO Summit is coming up late June. If you haven't registered yet, please do. I'm working on putting together a happy hour ahead of time that I'll follow up via email, but we're going to be serving smoke jumper margaritas for anybody who's a fan of mezcal. So hope to see you all there. Melissa, I'll turn it back to you if you've got any other updates for us.
Oh, well, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. If you have missed one of the previous meetings or just were unaware, we do have a member committee hub on our website. So if you ever want any of the resources, want to watch this video back, share this presentation, it will be on our website tomorrow. I think that's it. I hope to see everybody in Santa Ynez Valley.
Thanks for
Awesome.
listening to us and your time, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks,
Thanks,
everyone.
y'all. Have a good week.
Have a good day.